Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna watch a video from Arzamas. It's ancient Rome in 20 minutes. I've never heard of this channel and I'm pretty intrigued in ancient Rome, as many people and men are, right? It's a very interesting time. And yeah, original videos down below and let's go.
Here are the letters the Romans gave us. And here are the countries whose languages derive from Latin.
Look at that. I mean, we know... That's quite interesting. So Italy, obviously. So the Romantic languages. So of course, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. Because Portuguese is similar to Spanish. Right? Belgium, because they speak French there. Switzerland, because they speak French and somewhat Italian. And I mean, in South and North America it makes sense because they speak Portuguese and Spanish. Africa makes sense because former colonies. Now it's two countries, but Romania and Moldova. Why are those? Why? That's pretty interesting. What? I thought they would have more influence from, like, Eastern Orthodoxy, like Cyrillic languages, more than from the Romance languages. That's pretty interesting. But spoken. It might not be written, but spoken. But okay, let's see.
Today they cover half the world.
Sure.
As for the ancient Romans, the boundaries of their state encompassed their entire civilization. The Roman peace, or Pax Romana, serves as the first example of globalization. Let's take a walk across 12 centuries of the Roman history.
12 centuries. Just think about that. 12 centuries. Wow.
Yes, those numerals are also a Roman legacy.
20 minutes. Nice.
What is Rome? A city on 7 hills, capital of Italy. But that is today. And 2,000 years ago, there it is. Another 1,000 years ago, there. A tiny tribal settlement of the Latins by the river Tiber. How did this manage to conquer the world? First, it was lucky with its neighbors. To the north, the Etruscans of modern Tuscany.
I mean, the Etruscans are also very interesting people, and it's not a country, but it's a settlement, right? But I mean, it's sad that we don't know that much about them. We know them from Rome, but then we also don't know everything about Rome, so it's interesting.
Mysterious people whose language has never been fully deciphered. To the south, Greek colonies. These peoples all traded with each other. It was at the crossroads of their trade routes that Rome appeared.
I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's sort of like Krakow in Poland. It was in between Russia and Holy Roman Empire, or Germany. It wasn't Germany back then, but it was. And then Krakow became a big city for outlaws, people who weren't treated that well in their own communities or countries, land. Right? That's why a lot of Jews went to Krakow, because they weren't treated well in their own countries. So they went to Krakow. Also, the timeline, usually people get this, like, not mixed up, but people think that Rome and when Greece were, like, great, or the Greek states were powerful and big, they think of it being in the same time, right? But you see here, Greeks have already colonies in the Italian boot and in Sicily, right? And Rome is just a settlement, right? This is interesting.
From the very start, Rome has been an open city, a safe haven for outcasts, murderers, runaway slaves.
Same
Rome
like
offered
Krakow.
migrants a unique opportunity to become fully fledged citizens. This will make Rome the largest metropolitan city of the ancient world. The Romans themselves believed they were descendants of refugees from the Middle East who had survived the Trojan War.
I mean, I have to do a reaction video to the Trojan Wars. I mean, that's very interesting. If that's true, that the Romans were descendants of refugees or people who fled Troy after the Greeks took it over, that would be pretty cool, right? Pretty interesting that they went to Rome. I mean, I know it's an open city, but how do you know at that time that it was? Word of mouth travels fast, but okay.
Romulus and Remus were the great-grandchildren of the Trojan hero Aeneas. Nursed by an Italian she-wolf, the brothers quarreled where to site the future world capital. Romulus killed Remus, gave his name to the city, and became its first ruler. As legend has it, there were 7 kings, each of which enjoyed a lengthy reign.
I mean, that's very interesting also. I don't think people who like Rome, right? To read about it, to know certain things about it, mostly the military actions of the Roman Empire, not the Republic, but okay. I don't think most people, just normal people who like Rome, don't know that Rome had kings, right? And it makes sense because it was a long time, and then Rome became a republic, and then it became an empire. And people mostly know Rome with the empire, not that much with a republic, but if they know, they know, but they don't know about the kings. Or they think that the emperors are kings. Okay.
Left some beneficial legacy. A calendar, a sewer system, or the Capitolium, a temple to the senior god Jupiter. Much of what the Romans later became famous for, aqueducts, bridges, perhaps even the gladiatorial games, were borrowed from the Etruscans. This people had invented the Latin alphabet by adapting the Greek letters for their own needs. It's not surprising that their last kings were Etruscan. Rome borrowed her military and government organization from them, while maintaining her stern, patriarchal simplicity. In 509, Rome was shaken by a sex scandal. The son of King Tarquin the Proud raped the chaste Lucretia. Tarquin was expelled, making him the last king of Rome.
Republic, exactly. The manhole covers, I don't know if they are from the Roman time. I think they are. Probably the old ones are. That's pretty cool to see in real life, right? But I don't think people know that SPQR is of the Republic, not Empire. Right? But okay.
The Romans decided to prevent any such concentration of power ever again. From 509 onwards, they elected 2 consuls to serve a year apiece, instead of
pretty interesting.
The consuls were controlled by the Senate. This consisted of 300 fathers, patres in Latin, hence the term patricians. Those not so lucky to be born into the right families joined the plebs. Even if they were as rich as patricians, they were not entitled to take up positions in the state.
Pretty interesting that they set it up that way when they said that they don't want a king, a sole ruler, to be in power, right? But then the system that they're going here is that you have to be born in the right family. But how do you decide that you're born in the right family? You can't do that, right? So you're still using some of that king rules, right? The king and then the son, right? You're still using it, so of course you don't have one person in power, but the system that you're picking people who are the 2 counselors who are in power is from the king's system. I don't know, whatever.
It is in the 200-year struggle for these rights that the Republic, literally meaning public fame, will be formed.
That's pretty interesting.
The plebeians would make up the backbone of the army, and to have their own way, they would threaten the fledgling state with emigration to a neighboring hill. Each time, the scared patricians caved in, introducing, for instance, the special position of a representative, or tribune of the plebeians. These had the right to veto any decisions of the consuls. One of the main achievements of the struggle was the publication of the first written laws. By 287 BC, the plebeians had achieved complete equality of rights with the patricians. The unity of Rome found its best expression in the formula Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the Roman people, which still adorns the manhole covers in Rome.
That's what I'm saying. Uh-oh, here we go.
In 390 BC, the history of Rome could have come to an end. The city was unexpectedly taken by the Gauls. The guard dogs had sensed no danger, for which they would be crucified every year since.
That's pretty brutal. Wow. So Rome was taken. Okay. Yeah.
Awoke the last protectors of the Capitoline Hill fortress instead, saving Rome from complete destruction. The shaken Romans conducted a military reform. The Roman legion was divided into manipuli, making it more mobile in battle. The Roman army spent the next 100 years in constant wars. Instead of simply imposing a tribute on the conquered, the Romans would enter into a treaty of alliance with them, and the loyal allies supply Rome with a never-ending stream of recruits. Thanks to this, the Roman legions were able to stand their ground in battle with the most efficient fighting force of the time, the all-conquering Macedonian phalanx, led by Pyrrhus, a relative of Alexander the Great.
That's pretty interesting as well, right? Maybe some people also get confused that the Roman Empire was at the same time as Alexander the Great. Maybe not, they don't know, right? But, okay, that's cool.
The last stronghold of resistance in Italy, the Greek city of Tarentum, then hired the most costly and celebrated contemporary warlord of the time to defend against Roman expansion. Having conquered Tarentum and Sicily, Rome now had to take on a much more dangerous adversary, Carthage, lord of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
The Romans called the Phoenicians of Carthage Punics, hence the Punic Wars. They were fought over the next 100 years. In 149 BC, Rome had taken the greater part of Punic territory and that of their allies, but after each defeat, the trading power of Carthage would rapidly recover. Senator Cato the Elder began to finish every speech with the same refrain: Carthage must be destroyed. And so it was done. The city was wiped out, all of its population was enslaved, allegedly plowing salt into the earth as an eternal curse. Brutal. Also in 146 BC, the Romans wiped out another city, Corinth, making Greece and Macedonia Roman provinces.
There you go.
Rome appropriated the colossal riches of the disintegrating empire of Alexander, but the patriarchal simplicity of Rome succumbed to the sophisticated Greek culture. Greek became, in effect, a second-state language. The Roman nobility busied itself learning new words, hexameter, history, rhetoric. Cicero, the most famed orator of Rome, would come to model his speeches on those of the Greek Demosthenes. However, across this immense territory, full rights were only afforded to the Romans themselves. Even other Italians, the majority of the military, had no citizenship rights. These would demand equality, declare war, and win the right to take part in managing the state.
But I mean, one problem with that, what he just said, well, it's not what he said, but what they did, right? So the people who didn't have full rights revolted and started wars and all that to get those. But the problem with the state, or Romans here, giving full citizenship and rights to other people is that at the same time they can just take them away because they gave it to them. Right? I think I've said this before in a previous video, I don't know, but when a government gives you rights, they can take them away. That's why US is a pretty good experiment for human rights, because people are born with rights. They're not given. The state protects the born-given rights. Right? They're not given. They're protected by the state. Here we go.
This was a total game changer. While ancient Greece remained a collection of squabbling city-states, Rome gradually extended citizenship rights to the conquered, laying down the basis for an empire.
That's smart. Civil War and a fall of Republic. Uh-oh.
Having conquered half the world, Rome fell victim to globalization. Cheap grain and an inflow of unpaid slave labor bankrupted the small farmers.
I mean, one thing that is great about the Roman Empire and why a lot of people like it, love it, I do, is that a lot of history that you learn about the Roman Empire is more of a way of looking at life, what could happen, right? So this that we're hearing now, right, instability, poor people rushing into big cities, this all happens all the time in countries, right, in regions. This is probably happening in the Western world and almost the entire world today, right? And what's to say that a lot of countries, probably in 10, 20, 30 years, will disappear, or not disappear, but go under, right? Right, let's say France have a revolution. I mean, that could happen, and they split. Let's say Barcelona leaves, or Catalonia leaves Spain. There you go, right? So looking at Roman history is pretty interesting because it's more that you learn stuff. It's like the Bible. You read things that are probably practical, but a lot of it is more how to live life, right? It's more of it's not theories, but it's more of a way of looking at life, right? It's more philosophical questions than practical solutions. But of course, it is practical solutions, but it also, you know, that's why ancient history is pretty awesome and interesting, and Roman history and Greek history, right? And ancient Chinese history is also great, right? Let's go.
These rushed into the cities and joined the ranks of the proletariat, those who have nothing to lose except their own offspring.
That's what it means.
At the same time, the rich grew 100 times richer, having bought land from the ruined peasants for a song.
Isn't that happening right now? In the Western world, at least. And China is doing that in Africa, right? Although their economy is probably fake, as a lot of countries have a fake economy in the world today, right? Inflated. But that's pretty interesting because this is happening all. Let's just take it in the US. This is sort of happening, right? That big companies are buying up cheap land. This is not exclusive, but this is happening actually in a much smaller scale, but in Hawaii, right? In Maui after the fires, right? Private companies, even the state comes in and say, oh, we can just buy your land for this cheap, even though you bought this land for this much and you had it for these many generations. We're just going to take it and buy it for this much. And just take the money and go, right? Again, you can contrast Roman history with today, with history 100 years ago, 200 years ago, right? And see some similarities. History doesn't repeat itself. It often rhymes. I don't know who said that, but that's pretty smart. Let's go.
Previously united, the Senate and the Roman people split into two hostile camps. The tribunes of the people, the Gracchi brothers, would try to reconcile them. They proposed granting excess public lands to the impoverished peasants and suggested free distribution of bread to the poor. The disgruntled senators decided to suppress the Gracchi movement by force, killing the brothers and several thousand of their allies. Rome was gripped by civil wars. Social mobility for the proletariat was offered by Gaius Marius, a popular general. He began enrolling the proletariat into the army with a promise of a grant of land at the end of service. This would make the legions personally devoted to their generals. In 49 BC, two outstanding generals fought over Rome.
Caesar.
Gnaeus Pompeius had won the eastern provinces for Rome.
I mean, a lot of people know, of course, Julius Caesar. But I don't think a lot of people who know Gaius Julius Caesar knows Gnaeus Pompeius or Pompey the Great, right? Even though he did similar deeds, right? But conquering more of the eastern territories than the northwest, right? Like Julius Caesar did. It's cool.
Including restless Judea, cleared the Mediterranean of piracy, defeated Spartacus' slave revolt, and justifiably added the title Great to his name. Gaius Julius Caesar had conquered Gaul. Nowadays, they would call it genocide. He butchered 1 million Gauls and enslaved as many more. He went on to defeat the Germans and then invaded
But I
Britain.
mean, that is pretty normal at this time. It's not an excuse, but that's pretty normal. We saw that when Rome battled Carthage, they literally wiped Carthage and another city out and enslaved. Maybe they didn't enslave the entire population, but they probably took the men into military and the women and children enslaved, right? So this is not a one thing that Julius Caesar only did, right? It's not an excuse, but it's how they did back then. Every nation or community that had some kind of military power or economic power would do this. Sadly, but that's the world back then.
According to the law, a general had to dismiss his legions before returning to Rome, and in return have his moment of glory, a triumphal entry into the capital to the applause of the citizens. Caesar performed a hitherto unseen maneuver. He refused to submit to the Senate, and having crossed the Italian border, the river Rubicon, marched his legions to Rome. It would take him several years to defeat Pompey the Great and his other rivals, pitting Roman legions against each other. In the process, Caesar annexed new territories and gave Cleopatra the Egyptian throne.
That's also one thing that people don't know, right? Or maybe people know it, but they don't connect the dots. Obviously, this is the famous Cleopatra. I don't know how many Cleopatra there was, maybe 11 or something, right? But people don't know Caesar was at the same time as Cleopatra, the famous Cleopatra. Right? Oh well.
After a romantic cruise along the Nile, she would give birth to Caesarion, or Little Caesar.
Like the pizza place?
On his return, Caesar would add Imperator, or Emperor, to his name, title originally meaning victorious commander, and gain control of all political positions.
He's a king?
Consul, tribune of the people, and dictator. Rumor spread that Caesar wanted to declare himself king. Conspiracy was brought in the Senate, and Caesar was assassinated.
Yikes.
Caesar left his wealth, quite unexpectedly for all concerned, to his grandnephew, 19-year-old Gaius
Augustus.
Octavius. This Octavian immediately joined in the power struggle. In 31 BC, he defeated his last rival, the warlord Mark Antony, who likewise had an affair with Cleopatra. The lovers would take their own lives. Octavian was left sole ruler of a vast territory.
That's cool. Age of Augustus,
Julius Caesar ruled for 4 years. Octavian, assuming the title Augustus...
I mean, but Julius Caesar wasn't the emperor though, right? He didn't rule as emperor over an empire, right? He ruled as an... They call it dictator, but it's not the same thing, but it is the same thing, you know? I mean, the first emperor of Rome, I think, is pretty well established. It was Octavius or Augustus, right? Meaning,
Meaning the venerable
exactly,
or the great ruled for an endless 43 years. He didn't formally abolish the Republic. He simply took control of all possible positions, making his power almost absolute. But he modestly called himself Princeps, the first senator. And even though skirmishes with barbarians continued along the borders, inside them the period of Pax Romana set in,
when it began.
A period of peace and stability that was to last 200 years. The empire experienced an economic upswing. Bread was distributed for free to 200,000 people. On Augustus' orders, a 500-meter basin was dug at the very center of the capital.
I mean, imagine having that today. Wow, looking at that. They're showing ancient battles. Wow. Imagine sitting there and watching that. How did it get the water in? Probably connected a river, but still, wow.
Where 3,000 gladiators mimicked sea battles on real seagoing vessels. In Rome, construction was booming. Concrete and multi-story districts were growing. Augustus had to introduce height regulations, limiting skyscrapers to 6 floors. And still the citizens were unhappy. They complained about traffic jams, pollution of the waters of the Tiber, and high rents.
All those things that he said, pollution of the water, traffic jam, and high rents. Don't we see that in the world today? Right? High rents, of course. Traffic jams. People complain every day of traffic jams. In the big cities, of course, which Rome was. Pollution of water. We haven't had clean water as a human race because it's pretty difficult to have clean water that you can drink and not get some disease from. We haven't had that for thousands of years. Tens of thousands of years. Right? You drank from mountain water, which is clean. But then, of course, there's bacteria in there. And, we haven't had clean water like this. So that's why you drank alcohol like beer, juice, wine, right? This is cool. Another contrast, you compare Rome to now. And it's not the same, but it's different but same, yeah?
The golden century of poetry dawned. Okay. Maecenas, a quasi-minister of culture, allocated special grants to praise the value of the state. Temples would be built in the honor of Augustus, and even a month was named after him. Thus, the cult of the Roman emperors was emerging. They would come to be venerated alongside Mars and Jupiter.
First emperors.
After Augustus' power became hereditary, the senatorial opposition has left us vivid portraits of the first emperors. Suspicious
Nero.
Tiberius unleashed terror under the pretext of the law on treason. Under this law, any action could be deemed offensive. It was enough not to sufficiently praise the emperor or pay at a brothel with coins bearing his portrait. In distant Judea...
Wait. Oh, Jesus Christ. One thing though, I thought I'm sure they have forgotten about the kings. I thought they didn't want to have one single person in power. Augustus, I don't know if he was that cruel as Tiberius, but was it Tiberius? Whatever, right? He sounds pretty king-like to me, right? Okay. Jesus.
A preacher refusing to worship the emperor as God was crucified. Caligula wanted to make his horse a consul. A scholar and gourmet, Claudius, was too occupied with feasting and the reforming of the alphabet to keep an eye on court intrigue. One of his wives, Messalina, was giving women of easy virtue a run for their money in the brothels, and the other, Agrippina, poisoned Claudius with mushrooms to enthrone her son from another marriage, Nero. Nero, believing that he was a born actor, not an emperor, would later kill his own mother, and then allegedly the apostles Peter and Paul. Then he again, allegedly, set fire to Rome, so as to read the verses on the fall of Troy during the blaze. He would accuse the first Christians of arson, and initiated their persecution. And finally, he took his own life. Most details of this era are known from Tacitus, a historian and senator who observed the degradation of republican institutions.
But again, though, these all things sound practical, like they happened, but they also sound a little bit, not fairy tale, but they sound like there's more of how you think of this time period, more so of, not actions, but a way to think of life, right? It doesn't sound like it's practical history, like this actually happened. More of a way to think. I don't know. You can comment down below if you disagree with me on this, but I don't think it's more practical history. It's more of a way to think in life. Anyway.
The fate of the empire was now decided not so much by the Senate as by the Praetorian Guards, the emperor's personal security force, created back in the times of Augustus. These suffocated Tiberius with emotion, slayed Caligula by the sword, and hailed Claudius emperor. In all fairness, at the same time, the empire grew, expanding into new territories. Roman legions conquered part of Britain, where they founded a town called Londinium. Provinces were given a transparent taxation system, and the non-Roman nobility began to enter the Senate en masse. A grandchild of an Italian peasant, Vespasian Flavius, would become the founder of the next dynasty. Vespasian and Titus, suppressing the uprising in Judea, committed genocide, again according to modern day, not Roman standards,
what I'm saying.
and reduced the Temple of Jerusalem to nothing but the Wailing Wall. On a lighter note, Vespasian had a jolly good Roman predisposition. he taxed the collectors of urine at the public toilets.
I mean, that makes sense because they use urine for a lot of things, right? I don't know if they clean themselves with urine. Maybe hands, I don't know. But they used it for like sort of a toothpaste, right? Which makes sense. And then at the same time, it doesn't make sense, right? By our standards. But what are you gonna do? It makes sense because they also always want to get money where they can get it, right? Sort of like a mafia, but okay.
Toilets. And Titus, the destroyer of Jerusalem, would nevertheless obtain the title of merciful. After a splendid triumph, he opened the Colosseum for the people. Titus...
Ah, that's where... Okay, so he opened the Colosseum. That's very famous in Rome. Wow. I mean, look at that. How did they build that? That's pretty awesome. I mean, wow.
This would be called the love and consolation of humankind.
Oh,
and
okay.
after such festivities had depleted the public treasury, Vesuvius destroyed Pompeii, plague devastated half Italy, and Titus became a god.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Height of empire.
The 2nd century would go down in history as the era of the good emperors.
I mean, let's go back to that thing.
The 2nd century would go down...
All these... maybe 3 out of these 5, a lot of people know who, not who they were, but they know the names. I think they know Trajan. I know Trajan. Nerva I sort of know. Hadrian you know from the wall in England, stopping the Picts or Scots, right? Marcus Aurelius a lot of people know, right? That's pretty cool.
In history as the era of the good emperors. Trajan was considered by his contemporaries the best emperor ever. Rome became a 1 million-strong city, and the empire reached its largest extent. Rome connected her new territories via a network of paved roads. This system still determines the transport map of Europe. After Trajan's conquest, Hadrian busied himself with defense, erecting massive fortifications in Britain and between the Rhine and the Danube. Pantheon was built in Rome, the first temple to be topped by a massive dome, a real architectural sensation of the day, dedicated to all the gods. Hadrian would also include his lover among them, the young Antinous. More of his images have survived than of any Roman. The last good emperor, the throned philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, would spend most of his reign on military expeditions. In between battles, he wrote his manifesto for Stoic philosophy, Meditations.
Non-fiction. Wow. Uh-oh. Rise and fall.
Marcus Aurelius' son, Commodus, that the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, came to an end. He preferred a gladiator's glory to the affairs of state. Conspirators had the emperor strangled by a fellow fighter.
Whoa, that's pretty cool. He fought a lion and strangled it. He fought a hippo. Whoa, he fought a hippo. I mean, with a spear, but still.
The slave Narcissus.
Wow.
Rome sank into chaos.
Makes sense.
The next 100 years brought a sequence of random emperors, proclaimed by the army, taking their turn on the throne.
I mean, one thing though, I just came up with this. I don't know if it's a good connection, but it's a connection at most. This is... The Roman Empire, you can connect it to a lot of big countries, or empires, or republics, right? Or a United States like Germany, America, right? But I think just following the rules, not the rules, but the rulers, the emperors of Rome, you can link it somehow to Soviet Union, right? They had Lenin, Stalin, right? Pretty brutal. Then you had Khrushchev, right? But then you also had I don't know what's his name. He had like black or brown hair, I don't remember. But then you had random old Soviet leaders of Soviet Union, right? Like they're gonna show now. These are just random emperors, right? That the Gregorian Guards chose. Same with Soviet Union, and then Gorbachev came, right? I don't know, you can connect it. But okay.
Were a liberated slave, a fortune seeker who bought the throne at an auction.
Wow.
General Punic descent who would place statues of the former enemy. Hannibal all over the empire.
Whoa.
A Syrian priest of the sun. And a former shepherd who owed his popularity to his powerful physique.
Huh.
In 212, Emperor Caracalla, half North African, half Syrian, granted Roman citizenship to nearly all free subjects of the empire.
Okay.
The idea that you could be a Roman in Judea, in Africa, or any other corner of the empire at all might well be the main legacy of Rome still in use today.
That's true, but again, what I said, when a state gives you full citizenship or full rights, they can take it away. I don't mean if you do a crime, of course they're going to take it away, or you're going to serve that punishment, but they can just take it away because they gave it to you. That's just how it is. Let's keep going.
By mid-century, Rome was already in the midst of such a crisis that the whole provinces were starting to split off.
Yeah.
The Gauls, for instance, proclaimed an empire of their own. Order would be restored by the son of a liberated slave, Diocletian. Having started his career as a soldier, he would end up an absolute monarch, an astonishing example of social mobility.
How funny is that? How fun is that? How did it begin? How did Rome begin? This is what I mean by the history. Of course, it's practical, but it's also a philosophy. It's more a philosophy when you're reading about Rome than it's practical, right? So it started with absolute kings, monarchs, and Rome hasn't ended yet, but now they have an absolute monarch in Diocletian, right? It's not the same, but it rhymes.
Diocletian split the empire into four, with four co-rulers at four capitals, situated closer to the frontier. Rome lost its significance. The Senate became a town council. The country was now ruled by an army of officials personally reporting to the emperor. Thus, the ancient world, centered around the concept of a free community and free citizens, came to an end. From the princeps, the first senator, the emperor had become the dominus, a title by which slaves addressed their masters. The citizen became a subject, the warrior turned into a soldier, and the farmer a semi-serf. Diocletian himself resigned from the post of emperor 20 years later and went off to his estate to grow cabbages.
How fun is that? The end of the empire,
After Diocletian's departure, the co-rulers were fighting for power. Constantine, the future Saint Constantine the Great, emerging victorious. Before the crucial battle for Rome, he allegedly had a vision of a cross. After this, he made all religions equal. After 300 years of persecutions, the Christians came out of the catacombs and were now entitled to build churches alongside the temples of Augustus and Mars. Constantine would take the cross from Jerusalem to the new capital of the Roman Empire, Constantinople. Theodosius I would make Christianity the official religion and begin to destroy the ancient temples.
That's pretty sad. I understand why he destroyed it, but still, we had so much history left there. Why do you have to destroy it? That's very sad. Sad part of history. If you like history. Alright. But again here, one thing that people still gets a little confused is that they think that Constantine the Great made Christianity the religion of the empire. But that's not true. Just one thing that people get confused, but okay.
He would also be the last emperor of a united Roman Empire. His sons split the empire into west and east. The eastern half would live another 1,000 years. And is known to us as Byzantium. The western part would fall victim to the great migration of peoples. Rome, founded by migrants, would fall to the onslaught of a new wave of refugees. Ironically, the last ruler of Rome would be called Romulus.
And he was probably an absolute ruler, right? A king, right? Emperor, of course, but he had sole rule, so he's an absolute monarch. So history rhymes. Interesting.
In modern Rome, not far from the Colosseum and the ruins of the Forum, there is a tomb. Its occupant was neither emperor nor senator, but a simple baker called Ulysses.
Okay.
Likely born a slave into a family of Greek migrants, he later entered into a bread supply contract with the capital and became so rich that he could build such a monument for himself and his wife.
Wow.
Before Rome, in ancient Egypt and elsewhere, or after Rome during the Middle Ages, a man would die in the same station in life as he had been born in.
Yeah.
The life and career of Ulysses is an answer to the question of how Rome was able to create a global state that lasted over 1,000 years.
Wow. That was amazing. And that makes sense. But I think the world is falling back to how the world was before Rome and after Rome in the Dark Ages or Middle Ages, where you were born in a place, worked in a place for your entire life, and then passed away in the same place where you lived and worked. I think we're going back to this. Sadly, I think we are. Alright, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.